What's up, guys? What's up, girls? Sal here. I'm back again. I'm going to be going over this Week 11 slate for DraftKings NFL. You know the drill. Monday here. We're going to take a look at this first look that DraftKings puts out here. First look, we don't have any information. We don't have, very limited information, right? We're starting to get that information. We don't have any news on new injuries, anything that's coming later in the week. We're going to figure out the snaps. I haven't looked at any of that stuff. Haven't looked at the salaries. About to do it right now for the first time. As you can see here, we're going to take a first look at DraftKings, and we're going to see what we can build just off of this first glance, right? I'm going to quickly go over that Week 10 lineup, but before I get into that, if you could just take 1 second, hit that like button in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen right there, right below the video. If you could hit that like button. If you're not already subscribed and you want to subscribe, or this information is relevant to you, if you do play DraftKings, if you do enjoy trying to win money on daily fantasy sports, whether it's FanDuel, DraftKings, Draft, whatever it is, I'd appreciate you subscribing if you find my content valuable. And if you do, leave a message down below in the comments and let me know if you have any questions on fantasy advice, anything like that. But let's get into this. For Week 10, I would say that it wasn't a great week for some of the chalk, but some of it did hit, right? Melvin Gordon getting bailed out by like a 60-yard touchdown. But you have some things that are just crazy that don't crush you necessarily in cash lineups, but it does crush you in tournaments, like Eric Ebron going for 3 touchdowns in the first half, basically. If you don't have that in tournaments, it's pretty hard to win. Something that I did like in tournaments, and I was very tournament heavy this week again. I've been doing that the last couple of weeks, just trying to mess around a little bit. And obviously that's not a profitable route unless you have a lot of money. You got to spend money to make money, basically, to throw on it. But I'm only putting in a couple lineups into these tournaments and just trying to play around and discover a new tournament strategy that I like more. One that I've been following that I'll share with you guys is basically look at veterans who have had success in their careers, right? Veterans with success in their long careers that people are down on right now. And obviously if they're down on them because they're literally done, there's nothing left in the tank, or maybe they're injured, or they have like the worst matchup in the world, you're going to find low ownership there in tournaments. So a couple examples of this. This weekend I played a decent amount of LaShawn McCoy, and I played a decent amount of Allen Robinson. And both of them went off. I think Allen Robinson was one of the top receivers, if not the top receiver. He had 130 yards, 2 touchdowns. Shady McCoy also got in the end zone for his first and second touchdown of the year. So just guys who you know are proven stars, and they can get the job done, and they've just been getting it done for late. Allen Robinson was 2% owned in the Millie Maker. I don't think Shady McCoy was higher than like 4% owned, and they were both cheap, right? So you could pair up with anybody you want. My biggest regret was not having more lineups with the 2 of them in it. I only had one lineup with the 2 of them in it, and I didn't have them in a lineup together with Mitch Trubisky. I only had one Mitch Trubisky lineup. It ended up being my best lineup. I ended up having Aaron Jones in that lineup with Allen Robinson, Josh Gordon. I tried to bring it back with. He didn't do much. So it was a decent lineup build, but I do regret not having more of Mitch with Allen Robinson stacked in a lot of places, especially since the Lions cornerbacks weren't out. But that's all really for Week 10 that I'll talk about. Other than the fact that, yeah, chalk was not as hitting as you would think it would be, like Josh Gordon, like Tyler Boyd being priced up to a ridiculous price, where I didn't end up playing him because you can go up and you can get Julio Jones, which I did do. You can go up, you can get Devontae Adams, which I did do. And those are guys who you know are going to get targets, and you know they're proven veterans. Yes, Boyd's had a great year, but he hasn't had the spotlight at this position, for me at least. Yes, the targets were there, but to justify paying that much when I could get a star like a Devontae Adams, like a Michael Thomas for basically the exact same price, with who I think obviously a better QB in that situation, better offense overall, probably going to get the same target share, similar to Boyd. Boyd had like, what, 4 targets as low as the year, so not great. But that was just a Week 10 recap. I can go deeper into it if you want to send me a message, leave it in the comments. I'm going to start doing these recap videos separately. I did one week, looked at my cash game lineup, and I'm going to start doing that more as we go. Just this week I have some personal issues I have to take care of, go home and take care of some personal issues. But we're going to get to this Week 11 lineup now on Monday. First look, so a lot of things are going to change. I mean, some of these guys can be ruled out. We can get a lot better information. I'm just going off of the information that I have so far to this point in the season, and so far to this point after what we saw last week. Not trying to be recency biased, but in terms of like injuries or just guys that got new role changes, things like that. So looking at it, QB's priced down a little bit based on what we've been seeing, and priced down in this way that we don't have Patty Mahomes up there leading the charge at the 7K range, right? So we do have QB priced down a little bit here. Drew Brees, the top QB at home against Philadelphia, which is going to be a pretty good matchup, I would say. Philadelphia for Drew Brees. Great passing secondary. You saw the Cowboys beat them last night in a game that was a really good game, and would have liked to see what Philadelphia could have done if they didn't. If they didn't get tackled on that one play by the Cowboys rookie, That was actually a great tackle, if you guys know what I'm talking about. But I think Drew Brees has a great matchup here, right? Philadelphia's secondary isn't that great, and obviously we know what the Saints can do, and they're in the Dome. I think this is a spot where Drew Brees chalk week is viable. Like I said, you don't want to pay up a lot for quarterbacks, but at 6,500, yeah, we're paying up for him. But we're basically paying up for him if we want to look at his stat log. I mean, even now his road splits are starting to get a little more improved. But if we want to look at his stat log, I mean, he's averaging 29.3 points per game at home, 21.1 on the road, which is something that we expect from Drew Brees. And you can see 29.3 on the home, literally almost 30 points a game. That's Pat Mahomes numbers, right, on the season, basically. And you can see what he's been doing at home. I mean, in the Rams. And this Philly's an offense that can score the ball, right? And this is something that's interesting about Philly. I was watching the game with my roommates last night, and I said that Philly's receivers count. They're so deep, right? I mean, you have Nelson Aguilar. I mean, you had Golden Tate. He only played, I think, on 18 out of like 60% of the snaps. He got over in the trade. They were working a lot in 2-minute drills. Just situations where, or no huddle drills, situations where a guy's not going to be caught up to speed yet. That makes sense. But you're going to have Alshon Jeffrey out there with Zach Ertz. You're going to have Golden Tate out there. You still have Nelson Aguilar, Jordan Matthews. You have all these weapons out there in Philadelphia. You have the backup tight end. You have 3 running backs. They have so many guys that get on the field. It's hard to predict where fantasy success is going to go outside of Zach Ertz. We saw Jordan Matthews, Nelson Aguilar catch a lot of balls yesterday, or at least some deep balls. So I think it's tougher for the Philadelphia side, but as far as Drew Brees goes, I think you know what you're going to get out of him. You know what you're going to get out of basically Kamara, Thomas. You might get something out of Ingram. We don't know what's going to happen. I saw they just signed Brandon Marshall, so we can keep an eye on that. Don't know if he'll be on this slate. Probably not, because that was today. But Drew Brees I like a lot. And then right after that, Carson Wentz. So this is probably going to be the highest over-under total of the game. I think it came out early. It's getting the mid closer to high 50-point total. Probably will creep up. And it's just a good atmosphere again. Wentz is going to be in a dome. They're coming off a loss. Yes, they're going to be on the road, but they're going up against a very giving Saints defense. Both of these guys, pretty similar in price range. I like them both. I think in tournaments, a lot of people are going to target that. Maybe it's a pivot spot for that game, but as far as cash goes, I think that's where all the cash goodness is going to be early on. Coming down a little bit, Cam Newton, priced pretty reasonably here. We saw him. He didn't have the game that everybody expected him to have 2 weeks ago against Tampa Bay, because like there was 3 rushing touchdowns early on, and none of them were to Cam Newton. It was like McCaffrey, like the fullback, and then Curtis Samuel got one against Tampa Bay, and then Pittsburgh, just the whole offense was an onslaught. After the opening drive touchdown to McCaffrey, there's basically nothing left in there besides another touchdown to McCaffrey, but not too much fantasy goodness for Cam in that game. But as you can see, I mean, that's just an outlier game, right? If you look at all of his other games, that's clearly an outlier game. It's his worst game of the year. He had no rushing yards at all compared to all of his other games. That's something that's going to change. I think short week on the road, it hurts everybody. I'm curious to see what my Packers, they got the win finally. They unleashed Aaron Jones, the GOAT. Jesus Christ, man's averaging 6.12 yards a carry. It's about time Mike McCarthy let him out of a cage, keep him on the field every single play. I want 100% of the snaps Aaron Jones. He's a monster. But the Packers are going on the road on a short week. Curious to see what they do in a tough atmosphere in Seattle. But that's just Cam Newton, right? Every road team that's going on the road on a short week lately has looked pretty bad outside of that like Rams and Minnesota Vikings game. It's been rough, basically. So Cam Newton, I think, priced pretty well. He's definitely in play. Matt Ryan's been in play all year for me. He's been performing great all year. He had a game that he didn't look great in. His team didn't look great in, and he still produces you basically 25 fantasy points. So I think that is definitely something in play. Let's get this off the screen. There we go. He's definitely in play. I mean, there's a lot of guys. Phillip Rivers was maybe one of the chalk QBs. He was our first look lineup QB last week that I liked. Didn't have an awful game, not the game that you want to see out of him. Kind of got bailed out by a long touchdown to Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon made a play on it, got into the end zone. Not really what you want to see, but they didn't have to do too much in this game, right? It was a very slow-paced game. It was just kind of a boring game if you did watch it. Andrew Luck keeps throwing the ball a ton, so if we're just looking at this, there's a ton of value, right? And this is at the 6K range, below the 6K range. I mean, he's going to get you 20 points, Andy Luck, right? 5,900, going to get you 20 points. I don't see why you don't go there. Deshaun Watson's back on this slate. On the road in Washington's a tough place to play. Washington's secondary's been shaky some weeks, and other weeks it looks good. But overall, the last 2 weeks it's been terrible. Like, if you watch this last game and you just looked at the score, you'd say, oh, Washington played good against Tampa. Tampa had over 500 yards of offense. They were 0 for 5 in the red zone with 2 turnovers in the red zone. Any other team is going to score points there, right? Tampa literally had 1 field goal out of all those times into the red zone. So it's just, I think there's 2 missed field goals, 2 turnovers, like I said. That's just a product of your defense is literally bending, and it basically is breaking. It's just the other side of the ball is not putting it in the end zone or even kicking field goals. I think Houston's offense, especially in the run game with Lamar Miller coming on, they're going to be able to get it in the end zone. You can see you have a good floor here. He's coming off a couple of bad games where he kind of rebounded in his last few games. I think Deshaun Watson's a great play at 5,700. I think he's a great tournament pivot for a guy that's on the road. He's coming off a bye. Not a lot of people are going to be thinking about Deshaun Watson, who has looked good in his last 2 performances. We go a little lower and we try and find some value. Fitzpatrick's always a value. Don't really know if I want to play him in New York on the road, but he's always throwing for 400 yards. It's incredible how good this offense is for him. He's had 4 400-yard games on the year, and he's only started, 5 games? He's played 5 full games, so that's insane. Once we get down here, nothing in cash that really sticks out to me at all. So I think personally I'm just going to come up and I'm going to look right to the spot. I think I'm going to pay up this week, and that's how we could start this lineup up by paying up for Drew Brees in cash against a giving secondary when it's not really, at least last night, Ezekiel Elliott had his way on them, but for the year, it's not a defense that gives up a lot on the ground. Alvin Kamara, Mark Ingram are obviously great running backs, so they can have some say about that. But let's start with Drew Brees and see where we could build with from there. And like I said, I'll put in a cheaper defense just to see what we can actually get up to, and if we have to adjust later, we will. Oakland against Arizona. Don't like them on the road. Their defense is just buns. Jacksonville at home against Pittsburgh. You want to say that Jacksonville can get right, especially coming home, but it just doesn't look like that. Teams that throw the ball have had their way with them, but you have Big Ben on the road, right? So maybe this is a perfect storm for them. That could be a spot there at only 2,200, but again, their defense has been absolutely terrible, just giving up points at will, giving up yards at will. So we can go with Jacksonville here just to kind of put in something just to get us up to a higher average per player remaining. Let's look at tight end before we get into or actually let's just go to running back here. All right. So running back, most expensive running back, Melvin Gordon this week, $8,900. Like I said, he had that 66-yard touchdown that definitely bailed him out this past week. And he had a good game overall. I mean, limited touches based on Melvin Gordon, right, what he's been doing. Limited touches in the rushing game. That's actually not true at all. So you see here he has like 18 touches, basically averaging his limit in this situation there. So 5.2 yards per carry. They just couldn't stop him. If you would have given him the ball way more, he would have got over 100 yards. Just missed a 3-point bonus on Draftkings. Had a great game overall. I mean, look at this, 165 total yards for Melvin Gordon on the day. He had a touchdown, had a couple of red zone opportunities as well on the ground. So that's all he's going to get. He had the full workload for this team. $8,900, most expensive guy with, we know, Monday Night Football, the Chiefs, and the Rams. There's a lot of points off this slate right now, but with Melvin Gordon, the most expensive, makes sense. Saquon Barkley against Tampa Bay. That defense is very giving. Saquon Barkley, $8,700 is this is actually very cheap based on what we've seen from Gurley being at $9,500 to fit in 2 stud running backs this week, kind of jam them in. I think right here I'm just going to do this, Saquon Barkley. I mean, he plays tonight, so we don't know what he's going to do tonight. I imagine he's going to get you his 7 to 10 targets, and that's actually ridiculous to try and say that that's what he's going to get. But if we look at his average here in targets, the last 3 weeks he has 32 targets. That's ridiculous. He's had a couple of games. He's had 4 games now with at least 10 targets. I think that's something that's not going to change, especially in the coming week against Tampa Bay. I like that his price is at $8,700 because if he does do really well tonight, there won't be a price adjustment for that. Even if he does bad tonight, I mean, $8,700 is probably his floor price against a team like this at a matchup at home. But again, if something happens tonight, injury, obviously this is a scratch play, but we're going to put Saquon Barkley in right for now. And you have all these running backs on here. You have tons of good running backs on here. With James Conner on here, he's questionable, so we could see now. He's just a name that I saw. If anything happens, James Conner, doesn't look like Le'Veon Bell is going to come back at all. You could look at Jalen Samuels, who had a decent game and caught a touchdown in that game when Ben Roethlisberger threw to 5 different receivers. $3,600. He'll probably end up being like tournament chalk and cash game chalk if he ends up being the starting running back. But again, a rookie running back on the road against Jacksonville, who hasn't been a great defense. They've been particularly good at stopping the run overall. I don't know if I even play that in really cash either, but at $3,600, if he's going to get all the work, it could open up some things for you. When you come back up here, all the studs are on this slate really besides Gurley and maybe Hunt. But we have Elliott, we have Gordon, we have Kamara, we have McCaffrey, we have DJ, who has returned maybe to that stud role, right? Byron Leftwich was under Bruce Arians. He's running the same exact offense basically as Bruce Arians is. You see DJ getting involved, 9 targets, 21 touches, 30 opportunities. He had 28 touches in a game. That's what he should do every game, and he gets you 37 fantasy points. He's going up against Oakland, who is as forgiving as ever. Let's plug DJ in there, which, again, I know I didn't talk about Zeke, who had an incredible game last night going up against Atlanta. That's something that I want to play as well. Can we possibly do this? Can we go DJ? Can we go Zeke? Can we go Barkley with Breeze? Now that's expensive. We might have to come back at quarterback. Let's see what we could find value-wise, though, because I like this build. And again, I love the opportunity to play. There's a ton of matchups right now that I'm looking at this. You have the Chargers at home against Denver, who's been like, what, the 2nd worst run defense behind the Chiefs right now, second to last in DVOA against the run. So that's obviously a great matchup. I just think Saquon against Tampa Bay, who's been the most giving defense overall on total yardage, both rushing and passing, and Saquon's probably the most active running back in both those spheres. David Johnson, who I like at a little bit of a cheaper discount so you could fit in 3 studs. He got 30 opportunities, 28 touches last week with Byron Leftwich, and he made the most of them, and I think he'll continue to do that against very poor Oakland defense that we saw Melvin Gordon just have his way with both in the rushing and receiving game. And then Zeke Elliott, yes, he's on the road, but he's a monster. I mean, look what he did last night against a good defense. Puts up 40 points for you, 150 yards. That was like his 6th career 150-yard rushing game, which is insane since this is year 3 for him. He got active as he's been doing in the targets game. Amari Cooper's opening a lot up for this offense. He's opening up some work on the ground for Zeke. He's making Michael Gallup and Cole Beasley very serviceable 2 and 3s, and Allen Robinson for that, or Allen Hurns for that part. So I like Zeke there against Dallas, who if you follow, what's his name from the Fantasy Edge podcast, I can't think of his name right now, but basically he puts up every single week the Atlanta, what they give up to running backs. Outside of Adrian Peterson only getting 7 points, who he's literally only, like I've said in the past, he's only a rushing running back. If you can catch the ball, you can do well. Everybody else has gone at least 20 points against him, and Peyton Barber being the guy who only got 20. So Zeke Elliott, I think next week he's in a prime position, especially for cash, to go off for like 40 points. I think this is a tough week already looking at it because I want to play these 3 guys. I want to play Gordon, and I think ownership's then going to be low on Kamara, Connor if he's healthy, McCaffrey, Mixon, Fournette. I think Fournette's always a great tournament play because, again, he got 2 goal line touchdowns this past week. I think 1 receiving. Marlon Mack's going to go untouched against Tennessee. That's a tough play. Phillip Lindsay's going to go up untouched. We're going to have to see who comes back there. It's a lot of good matchups here, and you're going to see chalk, or guys who should be chalk, like maybe a Melvin Gordon, probably closer to the C.J. McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara range that aren't going to go owned because guys are going to want to play Saquon, they're going to want to play Gordon, they're going to want to play Zeke, and a lot of people are probably going to want to play David Johnson off of what he did last week. So I think this guy right here who had a great last week is not going to get a lot of run against a good defense. Again, he's on the road against a good defense for running backs to run on and get their way. Good defense. This is a good matchup right here. This is a great matchup right here. 2 of the worst rush defenses. But Atlanta's just so you have to play whoever's going up against Atlanta, especially if it's Ezekiel Elliott. I love Saquon Barkley's role in this offense. The man gets 20 points minimum a week, and if he gets in the end zone, he's going to get you closer to 30 points. And David Johnson, I like him for the discount of about, $1,000 at minimum for the guy who probably should be closer to $8K. Already, and I know that was against the Chiefs, who are very giving, but now he gets Oakland, who's also very giving, has a terrible defense. They cut all their pass rush, they cut all their guys who could basically tackle. I like this build so far. We're just going to have to go value everywhere else. If we can go really value at tight end, we can maybe even get a mid-range wide receiver in this lineup. So let's see where we can go mid-value here. I mean, early on, if we want to look, Ertz is just a monster. 14 catches last night. He goes for 43 points. It's a damn tight end. He had 14 catches last night. I think like 4 on the last drive, so he really helped you out there, getting like an extra 6 points. 2 tutties, 145 yards. This man is not a tight end. This man is a full-blown receiver. I want to play him every week like I want to play Kelsey, but you just can't afford him in this lineup. You possibly could afford him in this lineup. You just have to find total value everywhere else, and I don't want to punt that bad. So looking at tight ends, Olsen's back on the slate. He's pretty priced up for where he is, but I think Detroit doesn't do a great job against tight ends, but Detroit plays so slow. I really don't want to play too many guys. It'd have to be Christian McCaffrey, a guy who I know is going to get a ton of work, all the work in the rushing game, all the work in the backfield receiving, or possibly Cam Newton, who's obviously going to get the work. But other than that, Detroit plays so slow, and they just play so down that they're not a team that is going to be a threat that you're going to have to throw in the 4th quarter against them, right? O.J. Howard only had 1 catch for 15 yards. Surprised to see him still priced up there, and he had that catch early on. It's surprising when Fitzpatrick goes for like 50 attempts, 400 yards, and he still only sees 2 targets. Come down a little bit. Tight end's usually a spot where I analyze later in the week. I don't spend too much time on it early in the week. I just try and find value plays or just guys who I can fit in my lineup. Jonnu Smith at 2,700. He's had a couple of good games now. He's got in the end zone a few times. And at this point in the season, if you're not playing one of the top 2 guys in Kelsey or Ertz, maybe you can argue O.J. Howard depending on the week. Maybe Greg Olsen. For this week, at least Greg Olsen being up there. It's basically a punt play, right? I mean, last week, you're basically hoping for 10 points out of your tight end, and you feel good with that in cash, and if you get a touchdown, you feel even better. Jordan Reed's a guy I never want to play anymore because they just don't know how to use him out there. Finally got some targets, finally had a decent game, but he still only has 9 points. Guys like Ricky Seals-Jones, if we find him, who I played last week, ran more routes again, had a lot of targets. He's only $2,900. He's going into my lineup. Yes, it scares me to play 2 Arizona Cardinals in that offense, but that offense is changing, right? Recency bias is going to start to get some people, and they're going to see, okay, Josh Rosen has had his quickest release ever in back-to-back games. He's set his quickest release. David Johnson's more active. This is the Arizona offense that we're used to. Larry Fitzgerald getting more active. And now they have this big tight end over the middle of the field who had 9 targets, who's eventually going to find his way into the end zone again this year. I think this is a great play for a guy who's probably going to see not 9 targets, but he's probably going to see closer to 5 targets. And if he can convert those, he gets a long A dot. He had a 21-yard catch to start the game for Arizona. I like him at 2,900. That opens up some better value plays. We don't have to dip into the 3K range necessarily yet at wide receiver. We just want to look at it. All the studs are on the wide receiver spot too. So if you want to fade running back, which is a great tournament option, I wouldn't do it in cash because that's guaranteed touches at running back. But in tournaments, a lot of people are going to try and play all those running backs like I'm doing right here. You want to fade them and you want to go Michael Thomas, Julio Jones, Hopkins, and you want to do that same exact thing that I just did here with 2 expensive running backs and then a guy around 7K, and you go Hopkins around 7K. Or Antonio Brown was not a great matchup against Jacksonville, but he's Antonio Brown at 7,800. All the studs are out on this, right? Every single stud that I could think of besides Tyreek Hill. The Rams wide receivers they're all great, but they're not necessarily stud value like this. They're all out in this lineup. It hurts, and you don't have much exposure to any of them in cash. That's going to hurt you, obviously, because you have a guy who you want to pair with Drew Brees. That's our thing, right? You want to always try and pair somebody, but we just can't in this situation, right? You literally can't. So Brandon Marshall, you could possibly fit him in there, but I don't think Brandon Marshall's even on the slate. He's not even worth it either. No, he's not. Traquan Smith's been very risky to me. Like, I don't even think I want to play him. So maybe we go naked Drew Brees, but we're going to keep looking at this lineup, see what other wide receivers we could fit in there. Odell, he plays tonight. He has a very giving matchup against Tampa Bay. He's probably going to go off there. So let's see, this is already where I'm starting to think maybe I want to come off of like a Saquon and go Odell for a cheaper price, get up $300, and then you could still do something, cheaper at running back. Leonard Fournette's never a bad option. Kerryon Johnson's still producing, had a pretty well game this past week, caught a touchdown, I believe. Yep, he had 2 touchdowns. But down here, I think I want to stick with the guys I have, and we'll just look at value here. Tyler Boyd goes down in price. AJ Green's still supposed to be out, so maybe that opens up more value for John Ross, who caught a touchdown, but just not going to get peppered with targets. That offense looks pretty bad without AJ Green out there. But maybe that was just a one thing. If you can't get anything going at home against the Saints, it's going to be rough going forward. Corey Davis got in the end zone. He had a pretty good game against the Patriots. Usually Bill Belichick schemes to take somebody out of the game. He couldn't take Davis out. That was the guy who you would think he would take out. Davis continues to see double-digit targets frequently now, back-to-back weeks, and he had a great game. 5,500, I like Golden Tate here at 5,500. Who's probably going to play more snaps now, and yes, this is going to scare a lot of people off here for especially tournaments, but just more snaps. He's going to be able to play with another week under his belt. He's going to be in the slot against P.J. Williams. If we put him in there and we get exposure to that game now, he's only 5,500, but still gives us the ability to get better value. But let's come back to that. That just stuck out to me because he has a great matchup against P.J. Williams in the slot and New Orleans. We just have to see how much they're going to play him as opposed to Nelson Aguilar. I think they traded for him, right? They traded a third for him. They're going to play him. So he just has to get on the field a little bit more. He still was only on the field for 18 snaps, right? And he got 4 targets. That's pretty good. If he goes on the field for the amount of snaps that he should, triple that, and he gets you like 10 targets, I think that's a good week for Golden Tate. So we can see what he's doing there. We'll come back to that. Or we could just put it in for now just so we can see what value we have down here. Demaryius Thomas at 4,900. Pretty decent matchup against Washington because you know that Josh Norman's probably going to shadow or at least be on DeAndre Hopkins for most of that game. Started out hot. He had like all 61 yards in the first half, then nothing. Not somebody that I want to actually target right now. Value's tightening up down here. We have Kiki. We want to monitor if he's going to be coming off of injury. Said he won't return until he's 100% healthy, which that's good. We want to monitor that again early in the week. We don't know what's going on there. Harris was supposed to be the chalk this week, and he did decent for a guy who was only 3,900. He's priced up now appropriately at probably 4,500. Is probably the right price against Houston, which isn't an awful matchup for him in the slot. Coming down a little bit more, 4,000. Now this is all the same guys that we always see down here. We always see Willie Snead. We always see Godwin. It seems like I'm always choosing between Willie Snead, Godwin in this range. DJ Moore priced down. He has some flop lag coming. Basically, he was supposed to go off 2 weeks ago against Tampa, and he hasn't done anything since then. Decent matchup against Detroit. Funchess probably see a little bit of Slay. Slay doesn't shadow too often, but I'd say that he would be on Funchess, the bigger-bodied receiver. DJ Moore is an option at $4,200, just a guy who's not seeing a lot of targets. We would like him to see targets. Nelson Aguilar I'm not going to play, although he is an interesting play because he still saw targets last night, $4,100 in a good game. But I feel like this is something that's going to change once Golden Tate gets on the field a little bit more. So maybe that's a sneaky situation. We could play Aguilar there if you want to come up in money. Jordy Nelson came out for a little bit hurt. It's just that offense is terrible. Like a guy like this should be seeing more targets like he did earlier in the year and putting up some numbers. He's not getting any targets or any work. It's pretty bad. So let's see. We want to get a guy for Drew Brees to throw the ball to, right? but I want to stick with these running backs, which makes it a little bit tough, almost impossible. We want to stick with Zeke. We want to stick with Saquon. Great matchups, and I do want to stick with David Johnson because you do get a little bit of a savings at 7,500 for a guy who I think is a better play than a Christian McCaffrey this week, possibly a better play than an Alvin Kamara, just based on the matchup that they're going against. Let's see if we come off of Golden Tate. Let's see just one guy. Is there anybody down here that we can get away with? Chester Rogers, I know that Ryan Grant came back, so he didn't see much work at all. Nothing, one target. Tyson Sharp is always a guy that I think is intriguing, but really it's a matter of if Mariota is going to look away from a check down to Lewis, going to look away from running, or if he's only going to look at Davis. That's how their offense really runs right now. Ryan Grant did come back. He only saw one target still. This is interesting because he had two of your number 2 and number 3 receiver, basically, and you're only seeing one target each. How many times did Luck throw in this game? That's what I want to see. Luck only threw 29 times, which is rare for Andrew Luck. If we come down to Ryan Grant, maybe we play him at that price because he is so cheap and he is the starting wide receiver in an offense that has a good matchup against a decent matchup, I would say, actually, against Tennessee. But I think the matchup that's better is probably for Hilton, and he's at 6,100 against a guy who played well against his former team. He probably got amped up, but he's not a good cornerback at all this year. And let's see, can we fit him in at 61? Then we have to go 38. You have to find extreme value. If something opens up later in the week and you can build this lineup with T.Y. Hilton and get a guy at like 3,500, I think that's one place to go, right? We're already as cheap as we can go at defense, pretty cheap at tight end, but value, I think, at tight end. Let's say then you went Aguilar here. Yeah, see, so you'd have $3,500 left. And then at this point, it's basically a punt unless value opens up. I don't hate Allen Hurns, who's seeing some targets. That offense is getting a little better. But again, for cash, it's risky. Nothing down here, though, right? Erickson, supposed to do some stuff. People played him. They got a goose egg. Benny Fowler, he plays tonight. Don't want anything to do with that. Jordan Matthews seeing limited snaps and targets, but he's still catching some balls. It's just, there's not much down here. Stuff's going to have to open later up in the week. For right now, if we had $100 more, we can fit Ryan Grant in here, and I think we could still do that. So let's take out some guys. I do love T.Y. Hilton's matchup right against Tennessee. I don't think Malcolm Butler's good. He's not good. He's one of the worst cornerbacks. He's given up 7 touchdowns this year. I think he played decent against the Patriots, but that's more of like an edge factor. He came with his best A game, kind of pumped up. He had motivation to actually perform well. That's something that we can come back to, though. $4,000. I don't love this. This man didn't see any targets. That's not good at all. But he has a very good matchup, and you want to pair somebody with Drew Brees, right, in this situation. We could have gone Ben Watson. We can't fit Michael Thomas. You don't have to pair. You can go naked Drew Brees. But at 4K, not a guy that I really want to play in cash. Like, at this point, I'm just kind of struggling because down here is the same guys I'm always seeing. Humphreys this past week did terrible. He saw continued targets, continued playing time. I do like Gallup. I do like Gallup on there. I think he's going to be a great number 2 outside of Amari, but he needs some time to grow. Let's go DJ Moore just because we know he's going to see the snaps out there, not necessarily the targets, which I don't like. Let's plug him in there. Josh Doctson has caught touchdowns in back-to-back weeks, but he had pretty good matchups in those weeks. Don't want to go towards him this week. 4,700, we know that Kiki, again, I think Kiki's going to get peppered with targets and a good matchup in the slot against Washington. That's probably where you want to attack them more. And that leaves us with 5K, which isn't great, but it's not terrible. You can't get up to Golden Tate here. But you can go after one of these guys who are always seem to be in this range right here. You have the Kirk, you have the Westbrook, who I don't hate. He had 10 targets in this game. He's continued to maybe get 5 or 6 targets. And he has a decent matchup against Pittsburgh, right, where they might have to throw the ball. They're at home. You can plug DD in there. And this is just one way to look at this lineup. And this is if we go expensive at quarterback, right? I mean, you can drop down at quarterback, and you can end up going like Cam Newton here. That's not dropping down too much. It's only $300. So let's say we drop down a good amount. You can go Watson here to pair him with Kiki. So if we went Watson here to pair him with Kiki, this battery's about to die. Give me 1 second. Let me just change it. So if you were to pair somebody like Watson, who saves you a decent amount of money then, and you get Kiki in there, now you can get a guy like, you can get a guy and you can go up and you get a guy in the 5,800 range. You can get a Kenny Golladay, who did play well, and Marvin Jones did go out of the game. You see 13 targets. That's ridiculous. Carolina's not a great matchup, though, because we know that Bradbury's been pretty good on the outside. Corey Davis has been great. Indianapolis is a defense that can be had on the outside. Not a terrible option for a guy who continues just to see targets from Mariota, right? Targets every single week. Look at this. Lead leaguer, I think, in team target share right now. Pretty impressive. Julio might have beat him out, but he's pretty much up there. I do like Corey Davis. I do like Golden Tate in this range. But Davis is the guy that we know is proven. You still have $200 there. You can come off of a guy like DJ Moore if that's what you choose to do, which I would probably choose that. Maybe you go John Ross, who got some targets here. He got a touchdown. He's going to continue to get targets. Tough matchup, though. Although Baltimore's defense has been had in the past couple of weeks, you can't go up to a guy like Cole Beasley. So I kind of like this now. You have Cole Beasley against Atlanta, who's very giving, right? Especially in the middle of the field. They pepper or they funnel their defense to the middle and to the backfield. So you get a guy there who, these are smaller receivers now. Now, Corey Davis is a little bit bigger. Smaller receivers I don't like as much overall because they're probably not going to get in the end zone as much. Yes, they'll get more targets, so you hope that they convert those targets into receptions. But they won't get in the end zone as much. Bigger body receivers get in the end zone way more than smaller body receivers. But Cole Beasley's been pretty impressive in the past 3 years, especially at getting in the end zone, since Dak has been there at least. So I think that this is one way to look at this lineup. Like I said, we just previously saw me having Drew Brees in this lineup, which I think Drew Brees is a better play than Watson on a point-per-point basis. But if we look outside of the funnel, I think that Deshaun Watson can have his way against that Washington secondary. They've given up a ton of yards the last 2 games. And, I mean, is it a coincidence that Dylan Nix went there when that happened? I don't think so. I think he's actually makes defenses worse when people think he's good, but that's just my opinion on a guy I was watching for the past 5 years. So I don't think Deshaun Watson's a terrible play. We just saw what Ryan Fitzpatrick did to that secondary. Deshaun Watson is a far better quarterback than Ryan Fitzpatrick, and he can get you the points on the ground. Running back this week is loaded, so is wide receiver, right? This is probably the most loaded we've had of all the talent, and that's with the Rams and Chiefs being off the main slate, so that's pretty impressive. So I like the running backs that I'm playing. You can't not play Zeke this week. I think he's going to be one of the most owned players in every single tournament that you look at because he's that good. He's coming off a good game, so people see the recency bias, and he's going up against Atlanta, who running backs have had their way with all year long. Love Saquon in this spot at 8,700, and I love David Johnson. Wide receivers, you're kind of taking a risk with. Corey Davis, I do like. Kiki, I do like if healthy. And then you're kind of just taking a punt with Cole Beasley, who is a guy who has a good matchup. Playing 2 Cowboys can be risky, but it should be a high-scoring game, or at least a game where you can get a lot of yards. Maybe not touchdowns with Cole Beasley, but at least a lot of targets and yards is what you're hoping for. Out of a guy who's 4,400, you're hoping him. If he gets you 15 points, you're happy with that. So that would be 6 receptions. Hope he falls in the end zone, or hope he gets 80 yards for you. But that's it for a first look lineup. This is just Week 11's lineup. Early in the week, like I said, probably not going to be doing, unless they're already out for the Thursday night slate, I'll do the Thursday night slate, but probably not going to end up doing that one. Like I said, I have some family obligations to attend to. But I appreciate you guys. If you're at this point, you can hit that like button. It helps the channel out a ton. If you could hit the subscribe button, if you're at this point and you haven't subscribed already and you watch this far, you might as well. I appreciate that as well. That's in the bottom right corner. And drop a comment below. What do you think about this? It looks like it is a pretty loaded week at running back as well as wide receiver, but running back's a place that everybody loves to stack up on. Seems like a week that you should go 3, right? There's so many guys that you could choose from in this range right here, especially if Connor's healthy. He's been basically matchup proof, and he's going to be a guy that's not owned at all because he's a little bit cheaper, but he's right in that same range as a Joe Mixon, as a David Johnson, and people are going to want to go up for those other receivers, I think, or other running backs. I think Connor's going to be a sneaky play this week in tournaments and possibly cash because he's a guy who's just matchup proof, right? Yeah, only 14 points, but he came out of the game a lot, and they were leading the whole game, so they didn't want to risk it. But he's a guy who's done this, right? 30-plus points in 5 games this year. Absolutely ridiculous. But that's it right now. It's just the first look. Good luck tonight on the Monday night slate. I think there's a lot of opportunities out there with both of these teams. The Giants have a lot of playmakers, and I think the 49ers have a lot of sneaky guys who can do well in tournaments. But my name's Sal. Be good, be safe, everybody. Good luck tonight. Peace.